Tonight, we journey into the vibrant world of Eden, where life thrives beneath the glow of the celestial bodies, Solara and Luminara. And if you enjoy this original story, then please don't forget to leave a like, share your thoughts, and consider subscribing for more content like this. It helps others find the channel and become weary dreamers. But for now, get cozy and settle in for an immersive journey into the magical world of Eden. The emerald glow of Luminara painted Vale in shades of jade as Mesrin knelt in her mother's garden, pressing her fingers into the cool soil. The village settled into its evening rhythms around her. Luminaran shopkeepers opening their stalls as Solaran merchants closed theirs, children playing on the terra-stone streets. Mesrin closed her eyes and felt the familiar tingle in her fingertips. The skin there had taken on a subtle bark-like texture since she'd bonded with the whisper vines 3 seasons ago, absorbing the delicate flora into her essence. When she concentrated, her fingers could now extend into delicate roots, pale and seeking. She breathed in the night air, drawing strength from Luminara's steady presence above, and let her roots slip into the earth. The connection came slowly at first, a gentle hum of awareness, like voices heard through water. The moonbell flowers along the garden path murmured their contentment at the cool evening. The silverleaf herbs near the fence shared their satisfaction with recent rain. Mesrin smiled. This was why she'd bonded with the whisper vines. The ability to hear Eden's oldest voices, to understand the subtle language of root and stem. It made her feel connected to something vast and ancient. But tonight, something was different. The moonbell's contentment wavered, replaced by an undercurrent of unease. Mesrin pressed deeper, extending her roots further through the soil, reaching for the wild grasses beyond the garden. Wrong, 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 they whispered. Darkness seeping. Brothers dying. Mesrin's eyes snapped open. Her heart quickened as she reached for the rose vine climbing the garden wall, its thorny stems wrapping around weathered wood. Shadow teeth, it hissed. Vale bleeding. Run hide worn. She pulled her roots back, watching them retract into her fingers, the pale tendrils disappearing beneath her skin. The bark-like texture remained, a permanent reminder of her bond. Mesrin stood, brushing soil from her knees, and looked toward the dark line of trees visible beyond Valeshar's eastern border. Shadow Vale Forest. The ancient woodland had stood there for generations, a source of medicinal herbs and lumber, home to peaceful shade stalkers and glowmoss harvests. Mesrin's own whisper vine cutting had come from its depths, gifted by her grandmother before the bonding ceremony. "Mesrin!" her mother's voice called from the cottage doorway. "Supper's ready." Mesrin glanced back at her home, warm light spilling from windows, the smell of spiced root stew drifting on the breeze. Safe, familiar. But the plant's warnings echoed in her mind, cryptic and urgent. Vale bleeding. She needed to know what that meant. "Coming!" Mesrin called back, but her gaze remained fixed on the forest's distant shadows. She would eat with her family, wait until they slept, and then she would go. Whatever corruption the plants sensed, she had to see it for herself. Only then could she warn the village properly. with details instead of vague fears whispered by flowers. Inside, her younger brother Darmin sat at the table, his skin holding the faint luminescent quality of someone bonded with lunaris blossoms. Tiny, barely visible petals seemed to shimmer across his cheeks when he moved, catching Luminara's light through the window. At 13 seasons, he was already showing the restless energy of a Luminarin coming into his power during the night hours. "You've got dirt under your nails again," he said, grinning. "And you've got pollen in your hair," Mesrin shot back, reaching over to ruffle his dark locks. Sure enough, a shimmer of silver pollen dusted her fingers. "Been practicing your jumps?" Darmin's grin widened. He flickered, there one moment, gone the next, and reappeared behind her, tapping her shoulder. "Getting better, aren't I?" "Show off," Mesrin said, but she smiled. Darmin's teleportation was impressive for someone who'd only bonded 6 months ago. The lunaris blossom essence had merged with him smoothly, giving him the ability to shift his physical location across short distances, trailing silver petals in his wake. Their mother set down bowls of stew, her own bonding marks visible in the way her eyes held flecks of amber, evidence of a bond with sunset crystals that let her sense temperature changes in her immediate surroundings. Practical for cooking, she always said. "Eat up, both of you," she said. "And Mesrin, whatever you're planning, the answer is no." Mesrin looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "You have that look, the same one your grandmother used to get." Her mother's expression softened with concern. "What did the plants tell you?" Mesrin hesitated. "Just strange whispers. Probably nothing. Maybe I'm still learning to interpret correctly." Her mother didn't look convinced, but she didn't press further. They ate in companionable silence, but Mesrin's mind raced. She would need supplies, water, a light source, something for defense. The Vale wasn't dangerous under normal circumstances, but if the plants were frightened... She pushed the thought aside and focused on her stew, trying to appear calm. Tonight, when Luminara reached her zenith and her family slept soundly, she would investigate, alone. The forest welcomed Mesrin with the scent of damp earth and lunar jasmine. She'd slipped from her cottage when Luminara hung full and bright overhead, her emerald light filtering through the canopy in shifting patterns. The power that came with the moon's peak thrummed through Mesrin's veins, stronger, sharper, more attuned to the Edian energy that connected all living things. Her pack contained simple supplies: water, dried fruit, a small knife, and a jar of glow moss she'd harvested last week. The moss pulsed with soft blue light in her hand as she made her way along the familiar eastern trail. The forest had always felt like a second home. As a child, she'd played among these trees with other Luminarin children, collecting shade lilies and watching the luminescent moths dance on the breeze. Even now, the great silverbarks rose around her like ancient guardians, their pale trunks smooth and welcoming. But something was different tonight. The usual chorus of night sounds, cricket songs, owl calls, the rustle of small creatures in the undergrowth, felt muted, subdued. Mesrin paused and knelt, pressing her palm against a patch of moss. Afraid, it whispered immediately, "Deep wrong." spreading. She moved deeper into the Vale, following a game trail that wound between massive tree trunks. The air grew cooler. Mesrin pulled her cloak tighter and raised her glow moss jar higher. That's when she noticed the first signs. A patch of ferns to her left had turned an unhealthy grey, their fronds withered and brittle. Mesrin approached carefully, setting down her jar to free both hands. She extended her fingers, watching her roots emerge, pale, seeking tendrils that reached toward the dying plants. The connection hit her like a slap as the sickly flora all but cried out. Pain, dying, corruption, spreading. Mesrin gasped and jerked her roots back. The ferns weren't just sick, they were being consumed by something, transformed into vessels for... A twig snapped behind her. Mesrin spun, her heart hammering. In the emerald-tinted shadows, a figure stood frozen on the trail. Small, familiar. Darmin. Mesrin's shock gave way to anger. What are you doing here? Her brother stepped forward, his face sheepish in Luminara's light. The subtle glow of his lunaris blossom bond made the petals shimmer on his skin more visible at night. Tiny luminescent points that traced his cheekbones and jawline. I heard you leave, he said. I wanted to help. Help! Darmin, this could be dangerous. I told you. Mesrin stopped herself. She hadn't told him anything. She'd tried to keep her investigation secret. You should have stayed home. You were going to go alone into a forest that has the plants scared enough to warn you. Darmin crossed his arms. That's not brave, sis. That's stupid. She wanted to argue, but he had a point. Fine, but you stay close to me, and if I tell you to run, you jump straight back to the village. Promise me. I promise. Darmin moved to her side, peering at the blighted ferns. Is that what they warned you about? Part of it. Mesrin picked up her glow moss jar and gestured deeper into the forest. The whispers said something about the Vale bleeding, about darkness and shadow teeth. I need to find the source. Then let's find it together. Darmin's hand found hers, his skin warm despite the cool night air. They walked in tandem, sister and brother, two Luminarin drawing strength from their celestial mother above. Mesrin couldn't deny the comfort of his presence, even if his safety was now another weight on her shoulders. The trail descended into a hollow where a stream normally babbled over smooth stones. Mesrin remembered this place. She and her grandmother had collected watermint here once, the plants growing thick along the banks. Now, the stream ran black. The water moved sluggishly, like oil, its surface reflecting Luminara's light in sick rainbow swirls. Along the banks, the watermint had transformed into something else entirely. The plants had grown massive, their leaves jagged and sharp-edged, dripping with dark ichor. As Mesrin watched, one of them shifted, its stem bending toward them with unsettling awareness. Back up, she whispered. Slowly. The corrupted flora lashed out. Mesrin shoved Darmin aside and dove in the opposite direction. The plant's leaves slashed through the air where they'd been standing, sharp enough to draw blood. More plants along the bank began to move, their roots tearing free of the corrupted soil with wet, sucking sounds. Run! Mesrin shouted. Darmin flickered, his teleport carrying him 15 feet up the trail in a shower of silver petals. Mesrin scrambled after him, but another plant lashed out, its vine-like stem wrapping around her ankle. She hit the ground hard, air rushing from her lungs. The plant dragged her backward, toward the blackened stream. Mesrin twisted, extending her roots instinctively, driving them into the plant's stem. The connection was agony. Pure rage flooded through the link, mindless hunger and corrupted need. But beneath it, Mesrin sensed something else, a fragment of what the plant had been before the darkness took it. She pushed her awareness deeper, finding that spark of original essence. Remember, she urged through their connection. You grew in sunlight and moonlight. You fed travelers. You were gentle. For a heartbeat, the plant's grip loosened. Mesrin ripped her ankle free and scrambled backward, severing the connection. The corrupted mint writhed, caught between its true nature and whatever darkness had claimed it. Then it collapsed, its leaves blackening further before crumbling to ash. Darmin appeared at her side in a flash of petals, helping her up. "Are you okay?" "Yeah." Mesrin's hands shook as she brushed dirt from her cloak. "But we need to get out of this hollow. Now!" They climbed the slope together, Mesrin limping slightly from where the plant had grabbed her. Behind them, the corrupted vegetation continued to shift and writhe, but none pursued beyond the stream's edge. When they reached higher ground, Mesrin paused to catch her breath. Luminara had shifted slightly westward, her emerald glow painting everything in shades of deep green and shadow. The celestial body that gave them strength also illuminated their danger. "What was that?" Darmin asked, his voice tight with fear. "Corruption," Mesrin said. "Something is transforming the Vale's flora into monsters." She looked at her brother, seeing her own fear reflected in his eyes. "We should go back, warn the village council." "But you haven't found the source yet." "I know, but if we leave now, they'll ask questions we can't answer. What's causing it? How far has it spread? Is it just plants, or has it affected the fauna too?" Darmin straightened his shoulders, trying to look brave. "We came this far. Let's find out what's really happening." Mesrin wanted to refuse, to grab him and force him back to safety, but she knew her brother. If she tried to send him home, he'd just teleport back to follow her again. At least together, she could try to protect him. "Okay," she said finally, "but we're careful, and the first sign of something we can't handle, we run." "I know." Darmin managed a shaky smile. They pressed on, deeper into the shadow veil, as Luminara watched from above, and the forest whispered its warnings all around them. The corruption spread like veins through the forest floor. Mesrin tracked the dark patterns in the soil as they moved deeper into the veil, each step taking them further from the village and safety. The trails she'd known since childhood had become unrecognizable, familiar landmarks twisted into strange new forms. A boulder where she'd once sat to rest now pulsed with dark energy, its surface slick with shadow that seemed to breathe. The old lightning-struck oak had become a hollow shell, its interior filled with writhing darkness. "Do you feel that?" Darmin whispered beside her. Mesrin nodded. The Edian energy that normally connected all life on Eden felt wrong here, like a dissonant note. Instead of the usual harmonious resonance between Luminara above and the living things below, something discordant thrummed through the air, It made her skin prickle and her roots ache to retreat into her fingers. They rounded a bend in the trail and stopped short. A clearing opened before them, one she recognized. This was where the village held its bonding ceremonies during the full moon, where candidates came to commune with potential essence partners. Sacred ground, her grandmother had called it. A place where the barrier between living beings grew thin, where flora, fauna, and minerals offered themselves to those seeking to bond. Now, it looked like a battlefield. The ceremonial circle, usually marked by blooming nightshade and moon moss, had become a crater of corrupted earth. Black roots burst from the ground like grasping fingers, some as thick as Mesrin's arm. In the center of the clearing, a massive tree that hadn't existed before twisted skyward, its bark the color of midnight, its branches ending in sharp points instead of leaves. And at its base, something moved. "Is that a shade stalker?" Darmin's voice barely reached her ears. Mesrin's breath caught. The creature had the general shape of a shade stalker, the cat-like predator native to Shadow Vale, known for its stealth and gentle disposition toward those who respected the forest. But this was wrong. Its sleek fur had been replaced by segments of dark bark, growing in patches across its body. Where there should have been soft paws, crystalline claws extended, sharp and gleaming with the same oily rainbow sheen as the corrupted stream. One of its eyes glowed an unnatural crimson, while the other had been overtaken entirely by what looked like dark fungal growth. The creature hadn't bonded with Flora. Flora had bonded with it, forcing a merger that violated the natural order of Edian energy. "We need to leave," Mesrin breathed, taking a slow step backward. The corrupted stalker's head snapped toward them. Its functional eye locked onto Mesrin, and a low growl rumbled from its throat, a sound that held notes of both animal rage and the creaking of tormented wood. It pounced. Mesrin barely had time to shout before Darmin flickered. He reappeared 20 feet to the left, silver petals scattering. The stalker landed where they'd been standing, its crystalline claws gouging deep furrows in the earth. "Mesrin!" Darmin called from his new position. But she was already moving. The creature was fast, faster than a normal shade stalker, and unlike the corrupted plants, it had predatory intelligence. Running would trigger its hunting instincts. Fighting seemed impossible. The stalker turned toward Darmin, muscles bunching for another leap. Mesrin dropped to her knees and drove her roots deep into the forest floor, seeking any uncorrupted plants nearby. She found them, small, frightened, but still pure. A patch of moon lilies, hidden beneath the shadow of a stone. "Help," she urged through the connection. "Help us." The lilies responded. Their luminescent bulbs brightened, flaring with Luminara's borrowed light. The sudden brilliance cut through the clearing like a knife, washing everything in pure emerald radiance. The corrupted stalker recoiled, hissing. Where the light touched its corrupted flesh, smoke rose. It was hurt by Luminara's pure energy. The celestial force it had once drawn strength from now burned away at the darkness within it. "Darmin, move!" Mesrin shouted, pointing toward the trail on the clearing's far side. Her brother needed no further encouragement. He flickered again, teleporting in stages, 5 feet, 10 feet, 15, eating up distance in bursts of silver petals. Mesrin pulled her roots back and ran after him, her legs pumping as the moon lily's glow began to fade behind her. The stalker's roar of frustration followed them into the forest. They crashed through undergrowth, branches whipping at their faces. Mesrin's lungs burned as she pushed herself harder, faster. Behind them, she could hear the stalker giving chase, its corrupted body smashing through bushes with terrifying ease. There, Darmin pointed ahead. A fallen log created a natural tunnel through dense brambles, too small for the massive stalker to follow. They dove through, thorns catching at their clothes and skin. Mesrin felt something tear her sleeve, felt blood well up from a scratch along her arm, but she didn't stop. They emerged on the other side into a grove of ancient silverbarks. Mesrin grabbed Darmin's hand and pulled him behind one of the massive trunks, pressing them both flat against the bark. She could feel the tree's awareness through her palm, old, patient, uncorrupted. The stalker crashed into the brambles behind them. They heard it snarling, trying to force its way through. Wood splintered, thorns snapped. Mesrin held her breath, one hand clamped over Darmin's mouth. Her brother's heart hammered against her arm where she held him. Above them, Luminara continued her slow arc across the sky, blessing them with her emerald glow even as they hid in terror. After what felt like an eternity, the sounds of pursuit faded. The stalker had given up, or perhaps found other prey. "Is it gone?" Darmin whispered. Mesrin pressed her palm harder against the bark, extending a single root into its ancient structure. The tree's awareness washed over her, calm, knowing, but also sad. It showed her images through their connection, more corrupted creatures moving through the Vale, more plants turning dark, and at the center of it all, Source. "There," the tree whispered, "heart of the Vale, bleeding wound." Mesrin pulled back, her heart sinking. The forest's center, where the most ancient trees grew, and the Edian energy ran strongest. If the corruption had reached there, "We have to go deeper," she said quietly. "What? Mesrin, we almost died." "I know, but the source is in the heart of Vale. We need to see it, understand what we're dealing with before we can warn anyone properly." She looked at her brother, seeing the fear in his eyes. "I won't force you to come. You can teleport back to the village from here. Tell them what we've seen." Darmin was quiet for a long moment. Then he squared his shoulders, and Mesrin saw their grandmother's stubbornness flash across his face. "No, we're in this together." She nodded, trying not to show how grateful she was that he didn't leave her. The heart of the Vale had always been beautiful. Mesrin remembered visiting it once with her grandmother, back when she was barely 8 seasons old. The clearing at the forest's core had taken her breath away. Massive trees that predated Vale itself, their trunks so wide that 10 people holding hands couldn't encircle them. Luminescent vines had draped from their branches like curtains of living light, and the air had thrummed with pure Edian energy, so strong that even unbonded children could feel it singing through their bones. Now, that beauty had become a nightmare. Mesrin and Darmin stood at the clearing's edge, hidden behind a moss-covered stone. Before them, the forest pulsed with corrupted life. The ancient trees still stood, but their bark had turned black as pitch, weeping thick ichor that pooled at their roots. The luminescent vines had become something else, thick, writhing tendrils that snapped at the air like whips, their bioluminescence transformed from gentle blue-green to sickly purple. Where they touched the ground, the earth itself seemed to die, turning to ash. But worst of all was what grew at the clearing's center. A massive crystal jutted from the earth, easily 3 times Mesrin's height. It pulsed with dark energy, each throb sending ripples of corruption radiating outward through the soil. The crystal's surface was the color of dried blood, shot through with veins of shadow that moved like living things. "What is that?" Darmin breathed. Mesrin shook her head, unable to answer. She'd never seen anything like it. Crystals existed on Eden. Shade shards, sunset crystals, moon opals, but they were natural formations, part of the planet's mineral ecosystem. They could be bonded with, yes, but they were balanced, harmonious parts of the world. This thing was wrong. It didn't belong here. As they watched, one of the corrupted vines lashed out and struck a smaller tree at the clearing's edge. The tree shuddered, its healthy bark darkening where the vine had touched it. Within seconds, the corruption spread, consuming the tree from the outside in. Its leaves turned black and fell. Its branches twisted into cruel shapes. "It's spreading," Mesrin whispered. "The crystal is the source, and it's transforming everything around it." "Then we destroy it," Darmin said, his hand moving to the small knife at his belt. "With what? We're 2 children with basic bonding abilities. That thing is..." A howl cut through the night. Mesrin's blood ran cold. She knew that sound. Every child in Vale grew up hearing the stories, the warning songs sung by mothers to keep their little ones from wandering too far into the wilds. A nightmare, shadowy, lupine creatures that always travelled in packs. The beasts emerged from the forest on the clearing's opposite side. 5 of them, each larger than a horse, their bodies rippling with powerful muscle. Under normal circumstances, nightmares were dangerous, but avoidable. They hunted in packs, yes, but they respected those who showed no fear and offered no challenge. These nightmares had been corrupted. Their dark fur had been replaced in patches by sharp crystalline growths that jutted from their bodies like armor. Their eyes glowed the same sickly purple as the corrupted vines. Dark ichor dripped from their fangs, sizzling where it hit the ground. And strangest of all, plants grew from their flesh, thorny vines that wrapped around their legs, dark flowers that bloomed from their shoulders. They had become living hybrids of flora and fauna, the natural order shattered by whatever power emanated from that cursed crystal. "Mesrin." Darmin's voice was tight with fear. "We need to leave. Now." But before Mesrin could respond, one of the nightmares raised its head and sniffed the air. Its glowing eyes fixed on their hiding spot. It charged. The massive creature barreled across the clearing, its packmates following. Mesrin grabbed Darmin's arm and ran, pulling him back into the forest. Behind them, the Nightmares crashed through undergrowth with terrifying speed. "Jump!" Mesrin shouted. "Get away!" Darmin flickered, teleporting ahead in bursts of silver petals. But the Nightmares were fast, and Mesrin's longer strides couldn't match her brother's instant movement. She felt hot breath on her neck, heard the snap of jaws too close. Darmin appeared directly in the lead Nightmare's path, his hands raised. The creature's attention shifted. It pounced at Darmin, who flickered away at the last second. The Nightmare crashed into a tree trunk, dazed. But the others were still coming, circling around to cut off their escape. Mesrin's mind raced. They couldn't outrun these things. Darmin's teleportation had limits. He could only jump a short distance, and each jump took energy. Eventually, he'd exhaust himself. And then, a thought occurred to her. Dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it might be their only chance. "Darmin," she called. "Keep them busy. Just for a minute." "What are you? Trust me!" Mesrin dropped to her knees and drove her roots into the earth, seeking, searching. The corrupted plants wouldn't help her. They were too far gone, consumed by whatever darkness the crystal spread. But maybe, just maybe, there were still pure plants deep enough in the soil, below the corruption, below the taint. She pushed her awareness deeper than she'd ever gone before, her roots extending until they ached, until the bark-like texture on her fingers began to crack and bleed. The Edian energy around her felt wrong, diseased, but she pushed through it, diving deeper. There, ancient roots, the primal network that connected all the forest's plants, running deep beneath the corruption where the darkness hadn't yet reached. Mesrin latched onto that network and poured everything she had into a single, desperate plea. "Help us. Please. Your children are dying. Help us." For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the forest responded. The uncorrupted plants deep in the earth stirred. They couldn't fight the crystal's power directly. They were too old, too set in their ways. But they could help the young ones, the outsiders, the children who carried Luminara's blessing in their very bones. Roots burst from the ground around the clearing, pure and whole. They wrapped around the corrupted Nightmare's legs, tripping them, holding them. The ancient tree's deepest roots, untouched by the surface corruption, formed barriers and snares. "Run!" Mesrin gasped, pulling her roots back. Her fingers were bleeding where the bark had split, and she felt dizzy from the effort. But Darmin was already there, grabbing her arm and hauling her to her feet. They fled through the forest as the Nightmares struggled against the pure roots holding them. Behind them, Mesrin heard the creatures breaking free one by one, but the delay had given them precious seconds. The siblings ran until their lungs burned and their legs threatened to give out. They ran until Luminara's emerald light began to fade at the edges, signaling the approach of dawn. They ran until finally, mercifully, they burst from the forest's edge onto familiar ground. Vale Shah's eastern fields spread before them, touched by the first hints of Solara's approaching light on the horizon. The sapphire sun would rise soon, and with it, the Solarans would wake to begin their day, while the Luminarans settled into rest. Mesrin and Darmin collapsed onto the grass at the forest's edge, gasping for air. They were cut, bruised, exhausted, but alive. "We made it," Darmin panted. "We made it," she agreed, looking back at the Vale with a mix of relief and fear. The corruption was still spreading. Even now, she could sense it, a wrongness seeping through the forest like poison through veins. "Come on," Mesrin continued. "We'll warn the village council in the morning. All of them, Luminarin and Solaran alike. This threatens all of us." The village council chamber sat at Vale Shah's centre, built deliberately at the junction point where Solara's light and Luminara's glow overlapped during twilight hours. Right now, in the pale pre-dawn, both celestial bodies were visible. Luminara setting in the south, her emerald light fading, while Solara crested the northern horizon with her sapphire radiance. Mesrin stood before the council, Darmin at her side. Her hands still ached from pushing her roots too deep, and dried blood cracked on her fingers. She'd washed the worst of the dirt and ichor from her clothes, but evidence of their ordeal remained in torn fabric and fresh scratches. The council consisted of 6 members, 3 Luminarin, 3 Solaran, ensuring balanced representation. Elder Thessa, a Luminarin bonded with moon opals that gave her skin a subtle opalescent sheen, studied Mesrin with sharp eyes. Beside her, council member Vaughn, a Solaran whose bond with a sun salamander had left him with faintly scaled hands and an internal warmth he could channel at will, leaned forward. "A corrupted crystal," Vaughn said slowly. "In the heart of Vale." "Yes," Mesrin replied. She'd already told them everything, the warnings from the plants, their journey into the forest, the transformed creatures and vegetation, the pulsing crystal at the clearing's center. It's spreading corruption through the entire forest. Everything it touches becomes twisted, violent. Plants and animals are merging against their will, becoming abominations. Elder Thessa finished quietly. "What you're describing sounds like forced bonding. The crystal is somehow compelling flora and fauna to merge without consent, without the proper harmonic resonance." Another council member, a young Solaran woman named Kyra, spoke up. She'd bonded with ironwood bark and flame lilies, giving her skin a dark wood grain pattern and the ability to generate heat through her palms. "If what these children say is true, we're looking at a threat that could consume not just Vale Shah, but potentially spread through Eden itself." "Then we need to act," Vaughn said. "Gather our best bonded fighters, those with 3 bonds who can face this corruption." "No!" The word came from Mesrin before she could stop herself. The council turned to her in surprise. "Explain," Elder Thessa said. Mesrin took a breath, choosing her words carefully. "The corruption takes advantage of bonding. It forces connections that shouldn't exist. I think those with multiple bonds might be more vulnerable to it, more targets for the crystal to latch onto." She thought of the corrupted Nightmaws, their bodies hosting both fauna essence and forced plant growth. Thought of how the Shadestalker's natural bonding instincts had been twisted into something monstrous. "Mesrin's right," Kira said. "We can't send our most powerful bonded into a situation where their very strength might be turned against them. We need a different approach." "Containment first," suggested another council member. Evacuate the eastern farmsteads. Set watch posts around the forest perimeter. Try to slow the corruption's spread while we seek a solution. And the crystal itself? Vaughn asked. Silence fell over the chamber. Mesrin could see the question in their eyes, the one nobody wanted to ask. How do you destroy something that corrupts the very power they'd use to fight it? We need to study it, Elder Thessa said finally. Learn its nature. Perhaps there are scholars in other villages, other settlements, who've encountered similar phenomena. That could take weeks, Vaughn protested. Months, even. How much will the corruption spread in that time? Then we move quickly. Elder Thessa stood, her opalescent skin catching the shifting light. Send messengers to the neighboring villages. Dispatch scouts to monitor the Vale's borders. And Mesrin? Mesrin straightened. You've shown great courage and wisdom tonight. Both of you have. The elder's gaze included Darmin as well. You went into danger, discovered the threat, and returned with valuable information. But I didn't solve anything, Mesrin said quietly. I didn't find a cure. The corruption is still spreading. True, Elder Thessa acknowledged. But you gave us warning, time to prepare, and you demonstrated that fighting the corruption doesn't require becoming corrupted ourselves. She moved closer, placing a gentle hand on Mesrin's shoulder. Sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when not to act, when to pull back rather than push forward. The council will handle things from here, Vaughn interjected. You two should rest. You've been up all night, and dawn is upon us. Indeed, Solara's sapphire light now dominated the northern sky, painting the council chamber in shades of blue and gold. Mesrin felt the subtle shift in her energy, not weakening exactly, but settling. The night was Luminara's domain, and with her celestial mother setting, Mesrin's connection to the moon's power faded to a background hum. Darmin yawned despite trying to stifle it. The petals that shimmer marked his cheeks had dulled with Luminara's departure. Come on, Mesrin said to her brother. Let's go home. They left the council chamber to the sound of urgent planning, stepped out into a village beginning its day shift. Solaran merchants were opening their stalls, children running to dawn lessons, bakers pulling fresh bread from ovens heated by Solara's blessing. Normal life continuing despite the darkness lurking just beyond the forest's edge. Mesrin and Darmin walked through Vale streets in comfortable silence, their ordeal creating a bond between them that needed no words. When they reached their cottage, their mother stood in the doorway, her sunset crystal bond allowing her to sense their approach. I know you went into the forest, she said quietly. I know you faced danger. We had to, Mesrin replied. Their mother pulled them both into a tight embrace. I know. You have your grandmother's heart, brave and stubborn in equal measure. She held them at arm's length, studying their faces. You're not children anymore, are you? Mesrin thought about the corrupted nightmares, the twisted plants, the terrible crystal pulsing with dark energy. Thought about the choice she'd almost made to bond a third time and the strength it had taken to refuse. No, she said softly. I don't think we are. Then come inside, rest, and when you wake, we'll face whatever comes together. Three days passed. Mesrin stood at her mother's garden wall, watching Solara sink toward the southern horizon, while Luminara rose in the north. The transition hour, when both celestial bodies shared the sky, when Luminarin and Solaran alike could draw strength from their respective sources. The village had transformed in the past 72 hours. Watch posts now ringed the forest's perimeter, staffed by volunteers from both celestial alignments working in rotating shifts. The eastern farmsteads had been evacuated, their residents temporarily housed with families deeper in the village. Runners had been dispatched to neighboring settlements, seeking anyone with knowledge of corrupted crystals or forced bonding. And the corruption continued to spread. Mesrin could sense it, even from here. The plants in her mother's garden whispered fearfully about their brothers and sisters in the forest, the ones consumed by darkness. Each night when Luminara rose and strengthened Mesrin's connection to the living world, those whispers grew more desperate. "Still no word from the messengers?" Darmin asked, appearing at her side. "Nothing yet," she replied. "Elder Thessa thinks it might be another week before we hear back from the farthest villages. And in another week, how much more forest will be lost?" Mesrin had no answer. She'd returned to the forest edge each night, extending her roots into the soil to communicate with the plants still clinging to purity. They told her the corruption had spread another 30 feet deeper into healthy woodland. More creatures had been transformed. More ancient trees had fallen to the crystal's influence. They stood in silence, watching the sky shift colors as Solara and Luminara traded dominance. The sapphire sun painted the clouds in brilliant blues and golds, while the emerald moon cast everything in shades of jade and silver. Beautiful and eternal, the celestial dance that had governed Eden for as long as anyone could remember. "Mesrin! Darmin!" Their mother's voice called from the cottage. "Council's summoning you. Now!" They exchanged glances and ran. The council chamber was packed when they arrived. Not just the 6 council members, but dozens of concerned citizens, Luminarin and Solaran alike, their various bonding marks creating a tapestry of varying characteristics. Scaled skin beside bark-textured hands, eyes that glowed with internal fire next to skin that shimmered with crystalline patterns. Elder Thessa stood at the chamber's center, her face grave. "One of the runners has returned, from Thornhaven, 2 days' journey east." A young man stepped forward, his Solaran bond with a desert hawk, evident in the slight feathering at his temples and the keen sharpness of his eyes. He looked exhausted, as if he'd pushed his abilities to their limit. "I ran straight through," he gasped. "Didn't stop, because they need to know. Thornhaven has records, ancient ones, about corrupted crystals." The crowd murmured, a mix of hope and fear. "Tell them," Elder Thessa said gently. The runner took a deep breath. 300 years ago, a crystal like the one in Shadow Vale appeared in the ash-grey mountains. It corrupted everything around it, created an army of twisted creatures, and nearly destroyed 3 villages before they found a way to stop it. "How?" Vaughan demanded. "How did they stop it?" "They didn't destroy it," the runner said. "They couldn't. The crystal fed on Edian energy itself. Any attempt to attack it directly just made it stronger. Instead, they starved it." "Explain," Elder Thessa commanded. They evacuated the entire region, left the crystal with nothing to corrupt, nothing to feed on. Without new sources of energy to transform, the crystal went dormant. Eventually, it crumbled to dust. Silence fell over the chamber. Mesrin felt the implications sink in like stones. You're saying we need to abandon Vale? Not forever, the man said quickly. The records say it took a year for the crystal to die. After that, the survivors returned and rebuilt. A year, someone in the crowd said. Where would we go? How would we survive? The other villages would take us in, Kira said. We'd be refugees, but we'd be alive. Arguments broke out across the chamber. Some advocated for fighting, for finding a way to destroy the crystal through force. Others supported evacuation immediately. Still others wanted to wait longer, hope for a different solution. Mesrin listened to it all, her mind spinning. A year of exile from their home, a year of hoping the crystal would starve. And even then, no guarantee it would work. The records from Thornhaven were 3 centuries old. Who knew what had been lost or misremembered in that time? But what was the alternative? Send their people against a corruption that turned their own power against them? There might be another way. Darmin's voice cut through the arguments. The crowd fell silent, turning to the young boy. What if we didn't evacuate everyone? Darmin continued, his voice gaining confidence. What if we just evacuated the forest? Drove out every creature, every plant we could save, relocated them beyond the corruption's reach. Then the crystal would only have the already corrupted things to feed on. It might not starve completely, but it would be contained, limited. Elder Thessa's eyes brightened. And give us time to research, to seek other solutions without the threat spreading to the village itself. It would take tremendous effort, Vaughn said. Coordinating an evacuation of an entire forest's ecosystem. But it's possible, Kira interrupted. Those of us bonded with flora could communicate with plants, help them understand the need to relocate. Those bonded with fauna could guide the animals to safety. We'd need volunteers, Elder Thessa said. People willing to venture close to the corruption's edge, to make contact with the creatures and plants still clinging to purity. I'll do it. Mesrin stepped forward before she could second-guess herself. I can communicate with the plants. I'll help evacuate them. As will I, said a Solaran man bonded with a sun serpent. I can speak to the reptiles. And I can coordinate the birds, the man from Thornhaven added. More voices joined in. Within minutes, 24 volunteers had stepped forward, Luminarin and Solaran, young and old, each willing to risk proximity to the corruption to save what could be saved. Elder Thessa looked at them all, her opalescent skin shimmering with pride. Then we have our plan. We contain the crystal by denying it new sources to corrupt. We evacuate Shadow Vale's pure residents, and we buy ourselves time to find a permanent solution. And if we can't find one, someone asked, then we accept that Shadow Vale may be lost to us, the elder said quietly. But Vale will survive. Our people will endure. Sometimes that's the best we can hope for. The council adjourned to begin organizing the effort. Mesrin found herself swept up in plans and preparations, which sections of forest to evacuate first, how to transport delicate plants without damaging their roots, where to relocate creatures whose territorial instincts made them resistant to change. It wasn't a solution, not really. The corruption still existed, still threatened to spread if given the chance. But it was action based on restraint rather than force, strategy instead of brute power. Later that night, as Luminara rose to her zenith and blessed the world with emerald light, Mesrin stood once more at the forest's edge. This time, she wasn't alone. Dozens of volunteers worked alongside her, Luminarin and Solaran, each using their unique bonds to communicate with the forest's residents, explaining the danger, offering sanctuary. Mesrin pressed her roots into the soil and reached out to a cluster of moon lilies still growing in pure earth. "We're leaving," she told them gently. "There's darkness here, spreading, but we're going to a safe place. Will you come with us?" The lilies hesitated, their roots deep in soil that had nurtured them for years. But they could sense the corruption creeping closer, the wrongness in the soil. "Yes," they whispered finally, "we will follow." Mesrin carried the moon lilies to safety, Darmin teleporting ahead to mark the path. Around them, Vala Shah's people worked together. Luminarin and Solaran, both united in a common purpose. The corruption wasn't defeated. The crystal still pulsed in Shadow Vale's heart, a wound in the world that might never fully heal. But Vala Shah endured, and its people faced the future together, with power balanced by restraint, action tempered by wisdom, and strength found in knowing when not to push beyond their limits. That, in the end, was the greatest magic of all.